Welcome, everyone. We'll get going in just a moment. I see folks are just coming in from the waiting room now. To say thank you for joining us this afternoon. We'll give it about a couple minutes just for folks to be able to get in the webinar, and then we'll kick it off. Let's give everyone another 30 seconds or so, and then we'll begin the presentation. Again, thank you for joining us. Okay, well, I think that we'll get going. So again, thank you for joining us this afternoon. We're really excited to share a program update on a program that we've been developing for a little while now. But first of all, I think I'd like to go around and just introduce each of us, and then give others a chance to introduce themselves, perhaps in what we have here, which is a Q&A, or in the chat. So my name is Jacob Noonan, and I'm a housing program manager with the Southern California Association of Governments, or as we're also known, SCAG. And we'll cover a little bit about SCAG for those who aren't familiar with us in the presentation. With me and joining me today is Jessica Reyes-Juarez. Jessica, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jessica Reyes-Juarez. I'm an associate regional planner at SCAG, and I'm working with Jacob and the team on developing our regional early action plan 2.0 program. And I'll pass it over to Elizabeth.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Elizabeth Carvajal. I manage SCAG's Housing and Economic Empowerment Program. Good to see everyone. I'll pass it on to Zach.
Hello, everyone. Zach Gardea, Associate Regional Planner here in SCAG, and I'm also part of the REAP2 support team.
Great. Thanks. So I'd also like to give an opportunity to anyone who is interested to go ahead and post their name in the Q&A. And I was testing that to see who knew or was familiar with the SCAMF webinars and the Q&A itself. I do see a couple of folks coming in the chat. Thank you. Welcome. Welcome, Nicole. Welcome, Linda. Pleasure to have you both here. So the reason to mention the Q&A is that we will be inviting questions at the end of the presentation and during the presentation. But it sounds like it's more effective to receive those in the Q&A itself. So thank you. Adam Ellison is our first attendant to drop his name in the Q&A. Appreciate that. So you can ideally, we would get the questions in there. So to find out where the Q&A is, on the lower part of your screen, if you look down next to the raised hand, you will see a Q&A feature right there. So it's not the chat. It's different button. Let's use that one for questions. Feel free to add your questions in during the presentation, or add your questions in afterwards, and then we will have some time and we'll go through and respond to those questions. So welcome again, everyone. It's nice to see you all with us. So as an agenda, and to back up onto the presentation, we at the Southern California Association of Governments have been developing funding programs for our REAP 2.0 program. That's the Regional Early Action Planning Grant Program, and we'll cover what that is in the presentation. We'll start this looking at the agenda with an overview of that program from the state level, the REAP 2.0 program. And we'll also provide a little bit of an update on our approved sub-regional partnership program. This is to provide information and context for you all today. It is a program that has been approved by our regional council, and it's focused on supporting our sub-regional councils of government, but we'll to help implement housing elements throughout the region. We'll get into that a little later. We'll then be covering our draft PATH program. This is, we're still working on the name, and we'll actually be inviting you to help shop that name for us. It's at the moment, it is the Partnerships to Affirmatively Transform Housing program. So we'll be seeking feedback from you on that program. We don't have the guidelines available quite yet. We did represent this as a review and deep dive into those guidelines, but those will be coming out shortly. We will be able to provide an overview of the guidelines today for you and ways to provide comment, access the guidelines, review those, etc. In our presentation today, we'll cover the funding areas, proposed evaluation criteria, the tentative timeline, and then, as I mentioned, we'll be looking to hear from you. So we will have some time at the end of our presentation to take questions from you, and we even to just break the ice and to get our thought processes going. We've developed a couple of Zoom poll questions to run through with the group. So this all being said, I'd now like to pass it over to Jessica Reyes Juarez, who is going to share a little bit with you about SCAG and the State REAP 2.0 grant program. So take it away, Jessica.
Great, thank you. So for those who are unfamiliar with SCAG, we are a metropolitan planning organization, an MPO. MPOs are designated by federal law for regions and urban areas, more than 50,000 in population. So as an MPO, we work to develop solutions to regional issues such as transportation, land use, air quality, energy, economic development, and housing as well. So as the SCAG region, we cover 6 counties in Southern California. That's 191 cities, about 19.1 million residents. So we, as a region, as SCAG, as an entity, we also work with our state and federal partners on bringing funding to this area, to our region here. So that's a little bit of what we're here to talk to you about is this REAP, Regional Early Action Planning Grant. It's a state-funded program to help regions and jurisdictions with transformative planning and implementation to meet our housing needs and to spur housing productions. So REAP 2.0 was established with AB 140, that's the state budget. This set aside $600 million for the REAP 2.0 program. About $500 million of that is going directly to MPOs, and SCAG's allocation is $246 million. So this is the new funding source that's going to be coming to our region very soon. The state has required that these funds be obligated by June 2024, and they must be spent by June 2026. So we're working on a quick timeline over here. And the goal of REAP is to provide transformative planning. You're going to hear the word transformative quite a lot in this presentation. That's probably going to be one of your takeaways there. But really it's to lead to changes in land use patterns and behaviors for our region. And the state has identified these 3 program objectives to achieve this goal, and our funded projects coming out of REAP need to have an access to all 3 objectives. And these are to accelerating infill development that facilitates housing supply choice and affordability, affirmatively furthering fair housing, and reducing vehicle miles traveled. The state did release their REAP 2.0 guidelines this summer. So if you've been following that at all, one of the biggest changes is this is a fully state-funded program. There are no more federal dollars. And because of that, one of the earlier on objectives of coronavirus economic recovery is no longer an objective of this. So we're just sticking to these 3 and framing the REAP 2.0 program. So earlier this year, SCAG did work to develop a framework that would give us some broad guidance on how we will propose to approach this program in our region. So the core objectives that came out of that exercise were to provide transformative planning, realizing our Connect SoCal, which is our regional transportation plan sustainable community strategy, leverage and augment activities that can be implemented quickly, build regional capacity to deliver our regional housing needs goals, again, reducing VMT, establishing projects. We're really looking for projects that are shovel ready, shovel worthy, that can get off the ground quickly, that's consistent with our equity early action plan, and that will promote infill. That's another key takeaway here is the emphasis on infill development. And I will pass it on to Zach to talk a little bit more about how we have shaped this program.
Thanks, Jessica. So as Jessica mentioned, SCAG is anticipating receiving roughly $246 million from the state. And she mentioned that the two key dates to keep in mind: funds must be obligated by June of 24 and expended by June of 26. Now, SCAG is following the state's REAP 2 guidance in terms of our core objectives for our REAP 2 program framework. So again, proposed projects must meet all three objectives you see there: accelerating infill development, affirmatively further fair housing, and reducing VMT. On the right-hand side are SCAG's funding strategy for the REAP 2 program. So we have three different focus areas. The first being the early action initiatives. Under that bucket is the Sub-Regional Partnership Program 2.0, which I will get into a bit more in the next slide, as well as a couple of other sub-programs, as you can see there. The second area of focus is the CTC Partnership Program, and that one is self-explanatory. We are anticipating partnering with our county transportation commissions in the region and focusing on key transportation projects, furthering transit reliability and supporting mobility hubs. And then the third area is the PATH program, Partnership to Affirmatively Transform Housing. Jacob will get into this program in a bit more detail, but as you can see, there are three different areas within the PATH program. The first being the funding for lasting affordability, housing infill on public and private lands, HIP for short, and then the third will be the regional utility supporting housing, or RUSH. So the Sub-Regional Partnership 2.0 program, or SRP2, this is, again, part of the early action initiatives bucket. We do have an allocation to provide funding directly to our sub-regional partners, which includes our Council of Governments. The goal of the SRP 2.0 program is similar to PATH, except that it is non-competitive funding for our COGS. It's also focused on the following eligible activities, including implementing the sixth cycle of regional housing needs assessment, and that includes land use planning and related studies and programs, outreach for said programs, technical assistance, including staffing and consultant time, and other housing policy related activities. SRP2 can also be used towards efforts that lead to increasing the supply and lasting affordability for our local jurisdictions. And this includes supporting local or regional housing trusts, catalyst funds, and other permanent funding sources. So with that, I will turn it over to Jacob to talk a bit more about PATH.
Thanks so much, Zach. So in context, what we've shared so far is the big picture of the dollars that will be available in the region, and these are going to be set for these really big transformational changes around how transportation and housing are aligned with jobs, and how we're fulfilling our Connect SoCal, our major plan for regionally developing throughout the 6 counties. And the Sub-Regional Partnership Program, which will be provided to the region, the sub-regions, this meaning the counties and the cities, will really help implement the housing elements. So ideally, we'll have some good upfront planning being done in place to facilitate housing development, infill housing. So we're in thinking about that, and with that context behind us or around us, if you will, shaping, we're hoping to hear your thoughts and feedback on how we can design programs that really help to stand up and forward that good housing infrastructure that we need, and to do it in a transformative manner. And so we've been engaging with the community now for a while around what could help, and we've developed this draft tentative program that we're referring to as PATH, the Partnership to Affirmatively Transform Housing. There is some, like I said, it's up for discussion a little bit about what those words are, but we would like to keep the name at PATH program. And within this, we're looking to do three major funding areas, one of which is to develop a notice of available funding for lasting affordability that would be targeted to housing trusts and catalyst funds, but to look at funding innovative, to look at thinking about how we're innovative, how we're being innovative within our funding sources and funding streams, so that we can achieve the housing that we need. So we have that notice of funding availability coming out. And I'll get into the dollar amounts on the next slide for each of these, but I just wanted to provide some overview of each one. Then we're also thinking about two pilots. One pilot would be focused on our regional utilities supporting housing. And so this is a pilot that would be developed around an industry forum and shaping how we can best achieve the utility infrastructure that we need into areas where housing makes the most sense in relation to our transportation, infrastructure development, our jobs, and just where we have the available lands. Which now brings me to the second pilot, the third funding program that we're proposing here, which is our housing infill on public and private lands. The intent here is to really help scale up the development of available land and to focus on large corridor-wide or area-wide housing policies and initiatives that really set in place a larger scale of transformative development. I'm going to share the dollar amounts and then jump into each one of these categories. So first of all, in terms of the proposed funding, we are looking at $88 million in the PATH program. A bulk of that, 45 million, would be issued as the NOFA for lasting affordability. Again, this is for housing trust, catalyst funds. And then 35 million would be earmarked for regional utilities supporting housing. And that pilot program is really yet to be fully formed and fleshed out. We're looking to do that in this beginning of this next year, as I mentioned, beginning with an industry forum to really understand and get a sense of what could be most effective in creating the transformative change that we'd like to see. And then the third, 8 million, is earmarked to really support and help organizations, entities that hold land, that are interested in developing land as affordable housing, to help them navigate that process through assessment and feasibility studies to move that land into development. Now, we had mentioned the sub-regional partnership program at the early part of this presentation. We did that because we wanted to recognize also that although not within this program itself, but there is 23 million earmarked to help cities and counties really implement those good housing policies that will be developed in their certified housing elements, to move those programs forward and implement those early on in these next 2 years, so that we really reshape the housing market and the development capacity within areas. So with that, let's move to the next slide, which I'm going to dig down now into these three different funding areas within the PATH program. And first of all, in the NOFA, again, it's the funding for lasting affordability. We're looking here that eligible applicants would include housing authorities, trust funds, catalyst funds, entities that have trust funds, and additionally, community-based organizations or housing developers, but in partnership with one of those funds. And the reason for this being is that we at SCAG, we're not we don't hold covenants. We don't manage long-term commitments on affordability for housing projects and programs. And so what we would need to do is to provide the funds through an entity that would be able to do that, and then would be able to provide that through either a loan or a grant based on the needs of a project or program, and to hold that long-term covenant. So again, this funding is focused on supporting existing trusts, establishing new trusts, creating new finance products. Funding can be used to support pre-development, bridge and gap financing. It can be used for land acquisition and banking, provided that the land can be developed within the next 5 years. Let's move to the next slide. So the Regional Utilities Supporting Homes, or RUSH pilot program, again, this will be formed through an industry forum. That will help us inform how we look at regional infrastructure planning, how we consider utility infrastructure projects, and how we can really best support large-scale development around utility planning. Eligible applicants in this category could include public agencies, utility districts, tribal entities, or large-scale developers, and perhaps large-scale developers in partnership with affordable housing developers. That in this category, for instance, it would be developers that are looking to really transform and reshape large areas of land. But again, eligible applicants along with this pilot program will be formed through this industry forum, and the outcomes from that, which will occur this next year. Next slide. And so the last, the second pilot program, the last funding area within our PATH program is our Housing Infill on Public and Private Land, or HIP pilot program. Again, this is really focused on creating transformational changes in our development of available lands, scaling up, driving innovation, feasibility, visioning, and pre-development. As contemplated, the pilot program would be available to entities with land control, either public or private, and it's entities with regulatory control, so cities and counties. The goal here is to assemble a cohort or a list of available lands to provide technical assistance and support around identifying, surveying, conducting feasibility studies and analysis to help move lands at scale into development for affordable housing. Let's move to the next slide. So I believe that at this point, I'm turning it over to Zach, who's going to...
I'll take over. Thanks. Thanks, Jacob.
You bet. So I'll turn it over to Jessica Reyes-Juarez, who will take us through the evaluation criteria.
Yes, thank you. So we have this proposed evaluation criteria for the PATH program, and we're looking for our eligible activities to meet this criteria. So this is coming from, some of this is coming from our state objectives of REAP 2.0, but we've also added to it to make sure that we're meeting the unique needs of SCAG. And like we mentioned, SCAG is a very wide region, so there's a lot for us to consider in creating an equitable program for the region. So we would like to see projects and activities coming from PATH to lead to transformative, significant beneficial impact, include equitable targeted outreach, leverage partnerships, policy match and cost effectiveness, prioritize disadvantaged communities, and contribute to regionally transformative change for the SCAG region. So we'll jump into each of these. We'll give you a quick overview of what we mean by them. So when we say lead to transformative, significant beneficial impact, this is really the emphasis of REAP 2.0 objectives coming from the state, looking to provide infill housing that should be transformative. So that is to accelerate infill development. We kind of went through these already, right? Accelerate infill, AFFH, and reducing VMT. So really we're looking for projects that have infill development near jobs or other key destinations that increase housing supply choice and affordability, looking to combat patterns of segregation and foster equitable and inclusive communities. This could be housing in high resource areas, support preservation or protecting residents from displacement. And then in regards to reducing BMT, housing that's integrated with or connected to non-vehicular transportation options or having a connection to transit, encouraging a shift in commuting behaviors. And then moving on to our second criteria for equitable targeted outreach, we'd like to see a commitment to outreach and engagement, especially to disadvantaged and historically underserved communities. So if there is an effort or project already underway that has engagement, we'd like to see a commitment to continue that. And that's going to be a very important criteria as well. And moving on to our third one, leveraging partnerships, policy match, and cost effectiveness. We'll also be looking to see how a proposed project will leverage other resources to maximize the benefit of the REAP 2.0 funding. This is designed to be flexible, so there are multiple ways one can show how they're leveraging. It could be achieved through policy, local policy commitments, having policies in place that would support this funding, partnerships or partner match, having that support will could also show leverage, other local funding or local agency match. So a minimum match is not required. So there's not a local match that's required for this, but it could be one way you could show that you have leverage. And we're also asking for applicants to consider the cost effectiveness of their program and how they're developing their scope of work and budget. Moving on to disadvantaged communities, we do want to prioritize disadvantaged communities. This will include looking at some of these key data sets that we'll provide in the draft program, and that'll help us evaluate where we're targeting this funding, such as disadvantaged communities as identified in Cal EnviroScreen, or communities of concern as identified by SCAG. And then we have the TCAC HCD opportunity areas, which some of you may be familiar with, and then the AB 1550 communities. So that the program will provide more information on this, but the intention is to help uplift these communities as well, so that they have a priority in applying for these fundings. And then our fifth criteria is regional transformative change, supporting housing infrastructure. So we're looking for the infrastructure needs within policy, finance, utilities, neighborhood mobility. Like we mentioned, SCAG is very diverse geographically. That's very unique to the SCAG region. Our difference between infill, rural, suburban. So we want to make sure that we consider that when evaluating projects. So we want to also evaluate projects within similar development pattern types as well. That'll help us ensure equity in the program. And I will pass it back to Zach to kind of give you more information on our next steps and timeline.
Thanks, Jessica. So I'll give you a sense of where we are in our program development and what's to come and when you can expect the funding to be made available. So since our REAP 2 framework was adopted in July by our regional council, our team has been developing the draft program for PATH along with individual outreach to agencies and organizations around the region. As alluded to earlier, we will be distributing the draft program for PATH for public review and comment soon, within the next couple of weeks, I'd say. In the meantime, we are setting up 2 information sessions, as you can see on the timeline, the first session being on September 21st and the second on October 5th. Both of those sessions will be much of the same as today's workshop. So feel free to attend them. It's not too late to register for tomorrow's session, and you can register online at SCAG's REAP 2021 webpage. And we also will be email blasting out the draft program when they're ready. And those sessions will be recorded and posted online as well. So our working draft timeline, our NOFA, we're anticipating our NOFA to be made available, or at least an application period, in Q1 of next year in 2023. And then having that application submitted around mid-March. The first pilot program, HIP, that will coincide with the NOFA. The second pilot program will be behind just slightly. So again, as you can see, that application period is expected to open Q2 of 2023. For all of these focus areas, we will be, at least the plan is to release conditional award letters by summer of 2023. And again, these dates, the caveat for these dates is that they are dependent on regional council and HCD approval of our REAP2 funding application. So again, I mentioned this already, but our two informational sessions, as you can see there, September 21st, so that's tomorrow. That session is set for 10 a.m. to noon. And then the one on October 5th will be in the morning from 9 a.m. to 11. And again, you can find those recordings online. You can see the webpage there, scag.ca.gov/REAP 2021. If you're unable to attend either session. And again, we want to emphasize that we want to hear from you. So when our draft program is made available for public review, please forward them on to your colleagues and partner agencies and submit comments. You can submit your comments to Jacob. His email is noonan@scag.ca.gov. And again, if you're not on our email blast, we will be posting our draft program online at scag.ca.gov/REAP 2021. So with that, I will turn it back over to Jessica for the polls.
Great, thank you.
Jessica, before you jump in the polls, maybe I'm seeing some questions that have come in, and I think they're just about the presentation itself. So why don't we jump back up to the timeline slide that shows the 3 program components? That one, yeah. One down there. Mm-hmm. I think this will help us start. So one of the questions here is around let's see. So are these funds for cities, counties, transit agencies, or are they available to nonprofits and NGOs? So within these different proposed areas, we have different eligibility requirements. Within the NOFA, that will be focused on lasting affordability. A nonprofit, an NGO, a housing developer or a community-based organization in partnership with a housing trust, a city or a county that has a housing trust, a housing trust or catalyst fund that's formed through a joint powers authority could come in and apply. We are also exploring the possibility for partnerships within the HIP pilot program. The pilot program for regional utilities is focused on standing up infrastructure for housing around utilities. And so there you would need to have control, utilities control. So there are some opportunities for partnerships, and hearing or knowing that there's interest, we could certainly look at how best to create those opportunities for nonprofits and NGOs. Another question was if a portion of these funds could be directed to high opportunity neighborhoods. Within the state program, there is a goal for standing up strong support for affirmatively furthering fair housing, creating housing supply, choice and affordability within high and higher opportunity neighborhoods. So definitely funds could be directed to these areas. With that added focus that we're looking at ways to support folks that are living in disadvantaged communities, areas that have been historically underserved or in areas of concentrated poverty, creating good opportunities for housing within higher or high opportunity areas. This dovetails into other questions that I'm seeing here in the Q&A, specifically around disadvantaged communities or DACs, and whether rural DACs could participate in the RUSH program, for instance, to help finance their housing supportive infrastructure. And Elizabeth may want to share a little bit more about the work that we're doing around understanding our capacities, given the requirements for infill, but just so the group here is aware that the state partners have left the definition for infill to be very flexible. And so SCAG is now working with the state partners to determine what makes the most sense in relation to our vast region and to supporting the various disadvantaged communities within that region. I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, Elizabeth.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jacob. So as Jacob noted, the state guidelines have put forth a very broad definition of infill. And so when we get that program out there, we're going to include that within the information. So it would be really critical for folks to let us know whether there's some concerns about eligibility or ability to access the program. But as we've seen, the definition is very, very broad. So that is a key thing we would certainly want to hear from folks in terms of whether there's some challenges in accessing the program due to the state definition. And so that'll be out there when we get that program out for public review, and we're looking forward to some feedback on that.
Great. Thank you, Elizabeth. So another question here is around if a nonprofit housing trust fund, can that trust fund be a partner within the NOFA itself? That trust fund would be eligible to come in and apply for funding. There might be opportunities for that housing trust fund as a partner to come into the pilot program around housing infill for public and private lands. The caveat there being that we're really looking for the owners of land that are interested in developing that land for affordable housing. So thinking about, our larger transit agencies, our school districts, community college districts, perhaps religious institutions or cities or counties that have remaining redevelopment agency lands, just to name a few. But certainly, there might be some capacity for a nonprofit to come in partnership, especially in a case where it would help drive that the program for that entity that may not have the level of support service to execute. Priority, here's a question. I think this is related more so to the question around disadvantaged communities. And this is on priority growth areas do seem to skip low density, high income areas that have historically failed to accommodate their fair share of growth. So this is kind of going in the, I'm reading that more of a statement, but I'm curious if the writer, if Alejandra, if you want to follow up with if there's a question related to that. We are focusing, on some interest in having development occur in high and highest opportunity areas. And again, we are working on the definition of infill. That definition, I believe, could be broader than the PDAs.
Right, Jacob, and also our disadvantaged communities evaluation criteria, we are looking at the TCAC, the high resource area. So the priority growth area is just one data set that we're evaluating, but we're also considering the high resource areas as well.
All right, great. Thanks, Jessica. Here's a procedural question, and that is, has the PATH program already been approved by the SCAG Board of Directors, or can the program be modified to further support local jurisdictions with their specific housing element implementation requirements? Now, again, we are, excuse me, within the REAP 2.0 funding, we have already allocated $23 million to our subregions to do exactly that. And so at the subregional level, we've allocated a proportional share of that 23 million that will be available in each of the subregions based on the number of units of housing each subregion is expected to produce within this next cycle. So the vision that we've had here is that that funding would be available for local jurisdictions. The funding available within the PATH program could potentially do that as well within the housing infill and public-private lands. It's going to be related to really transforming how we develop lands, starting with a basis of organizations that have available land looking to develop that. If we could actually, maybe Jessica, flip down a couple of slides to the pilot program itself, so we can look at who the eligible entities would be in that program. So, this is entities with land control or entities with regulatory land control. So foreseeably, a city could participate in this program to do additional work on their housing element. But this is really going to be focused on quarter-wide, area-wide strategies, really scaling supply, choice, and affordability, preservation, anti-displacement, alternative models for homeownership, cooperatives, other models. And we're looking to dovetail that in with the idea of developing this cohort of lands that would be also available through the entities with the land control. Jessica, perhaps this is a good time. Maybe we do have a couple other questions that we can get to, but maybe we could jump over to one of the our little polls to.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and launch the first question. It's just some very quick high-level poll just to get some response and some thoughts here. So let me know if you see that first question. So does the PATH program, as you know, we've described and outlined with you today, do you think it covers the type of activities needed to advance housing production in our region? So it's just a simple yes or no, but if you have any thoughts on that, or you think, there's something else we should be considering, we'd love to hear your thoughts, and you can add that to the chat box. That would be helpful for us. So I'll leave this open a little bit. You guys can continue to answer that.
And actually try to add it to the Q&A box. I think that's the one that folks at SCAMP have asked us to use for the instead of the chat.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So just a little question to get our creative juices flowing. We have another fun little question too that we are going to ask you. Looks like.
Okay, that's great. I see a couple more people still participating. Yes, no, I'll go ahead and end the poll now.
We have some little drum roll, maybe.
Yeah. All righty. Do you all see the results there? Okay. So we're not 50-50. There were a little bit of both.
Well, this is great to have, though, and so thank you to everyone who did participate. We would love to hear, what is good about the program, and then also what's missing. We would love to either, in the Q&A box, or otherwise, when we release our program document, we would love to hear from you on what is missing. The goal here, this again is very draft. We have plenty of time to provide, give some thought to how we can shape this to best reflect our needs. So please do, provide something now, or we're looking forward to hearing from you once they're available. Maybe another question here that came in just now is, what is alternative models and homeownership? So there are a number of different models for homeownership out there. These are co-ops, they're cooperatives, there's, so just to name two different financing structures. There's also, the idea of, evolving the single family home model, and what that could look like with townhomes or with integrating some of the recent changes in state legislation into our zoning codes. There's looking at condos or just creating more affordability and the capacity for home ownership within our traditional home ownership models. So that there's a little bit of information on that. Can the NOFA funds be used for administrative expenses for new regional housing trusts? We'll keep that as a question for now. We're still working out with HCD how the funds can be used within housing transactions. So that's a question that I think we'd like to capture and we'd like to float up so that we can better provide information around what that could include. I should say, though, that what we're looking for right now in these funds is transformational change. So, if those administrative expenses in the new regional trust would be checking those boxes around transformationality, and I think that would be the first step. We'll provide more information in the NOFA when that's available in January. Jessica, do you see any other questions here in the chat? I've been kind of jumping back and forth. So
yeah, I think it came up a couple times about how, in terms of affordability, how will we work to make sure that that's included in the program? Like, what kind of requirements are we going to place on housing units, low income? What's our role there? And I know we're kind of fleshing that out still.
Yeah, we are. We still are having conversations with HCD on what their expectations in a project is, what their underwriting requirements would be. Our approach and thinking at SCAG to date has been to provide flexibility, ideally not to have yet another layer of requirements, but to be able to add on to an already existing requirement that would be on projects. We are, as I mentioned, SCAG, we don't hold covenants. That's not our role. We haven't been in that space before. And so we are looking to issue the awards as grants to an entity that could then place that covenant on the project and could manage those affordability requirements. Unfortunately, at this point, we just haven't had a chance to complete the conversations with HCD to understand what their expectations would be around this funding in housing projects, but we will have that available as soon as we can, and certainly before we issue the NOFA.
Right, and that's also, I think, touches a little bit on some questions in regards to the timeline of needing to expend the funds, right? And how does that work for our eligible applicants that are working in housing development? Like, where is it? Is it in the ground? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so far what we've heard is that the project needs to be able to be developed within 5 years. I think that we all need a little bit more understanding of what that really entails. What does it mean to be eligible for development in 5 years? So we will be working with HCD on a better understanding for that aspect as well. Thank you. I did see, and I probably neglected to mention this at the beginning, I apologize if I did, but the SCAMP team they are recording this event, and they will be making the event available, that recording available, along with the slides. So you will, I believe it's tomorrow, they'll be sending out an email with a link to the slides and to the recording.
Great. We have one more poll question we can launch if people are still thinking of more questions to add here in the chat.
Yeah, and this one, we thought of this one with a little fun and levity, but also, it also touches on semantics and how we're presenting our work within the community and engaging with folks and terminology and words that we're using. So as we mentioned, we are hoping that this is the PATH program. We know that y'all are, and we're mostly interested in getting the money out there and issuing the funds. But at the same time, we're curious if you had any thoughts on the name and what should PATH stand for. what's the best representation here of the funding sources? So, did we hit it right? Actually, did we hit it right? Is PATH the way to go, or is there another? And so feel free to drop that in the Q&A if you like, select your best full name for PATH. We would appreciate that, and also keep the questions flowing. Again, and maybe Jessica on the slides, maybe drop down to the slide that shows how to provide us with our written public comment, and has the website and my email address and contact information. So folks are, you'll be receiving this presentation tomorrow, but if you want to go ahead and jot down that web link, all of the information on the REAP 2.0 program is going to be available there on the website, including information on this program, the PATH program, as well as SRP2. So do we have any results from our poll yet?
Yes, we have a couple people still voting. I see. Okay, we'll end it in just a second. Okay, sounds good.
Drum roll for success.
A couple people sneaking in last minute. Alrighty. Okay, I'll go ahead and end the poll.
Oh, and should I mention that Elizabeth Hansberg has come in with an alternative: people advancing tons of housing. You know what? I don't know. I like that one too.
So I think what we're hearing here is we just have to pick a name.
Excellent.
Go ahead. So
All right. Well, let's. I think that it would be worthwhile. Let's see. The acronym PATH conflicts with the name of the homeless services provider in LA, named PATH. People assisting the homeless, and yet we knew that there is the PATH Ventures, and PATH was out there, so we recognized that. We were thinking that we may be able to also design this as the PATH program, but that's something to be aware of. So I really appreciate someone mentioning that. Thank you.
I don't see any more questions coming in, but I think we had one more quick slide, right, Jacob?
We do, and as I was mentioning at that web link to our REAP 2.0 programs, you will see all of our programs there showcased, including our County Transportation Commission Partnership Program. This is a partnership program that's designed to really support increases in transit options for infill housing, and to support through infrastructure plans, programs, pilot projects, some great infrastructure that's going to help support those housing projects that would be coming in to start to better align our transportation, our housing, and our jobs. So those program guidelines are going to be available, I believe, starting tomorrow. And there's a public comment period on that's going to go through October 12th. So definitely, if you're interested, please have a look at that, or have staff within your organization have a review that CTC partnership program and provide comments. You can provide comments to Alicia James. She's the community engagement specialist who's working on all of our REAP 2.0 program engagement. Also, you can certainly reach out to me if you had questions about the CTC partnership program, and I would forward those on, connect you with Kate Kigongo, who is the manager overseeing that program. So she's asked me to provide that information, relay the message that we're very happy to discuss this with you and answer your questions that you have around the program. So I did see, I think, one other. See, we had another suggestion come in, which is the BUILD program, building underserved infill land developments. So this is great. Thank you. We appreciate all of these good thoughts and suggestions. Oh, and programs to accelerate and transform housing. Very nice. Very nice. Appreciate that, Adam. We had just a comment come in, and it's around addressing some of the what people see as bureaucratic hurdles in local departments, and that really, I think we could all recognize that can be present in any city and any permitting process. And I wanted to take a moment to mention and acknowledge that I believe that the housing element process requires cities and counties to really look at that and look at their government constraints. And that's part of the programs that are included within the housing element work plans. And so any work towards streamlining the permitting process, making it easier to develop housing, would be something that is eligible potentially through either the subregional partnership program to those cities and counties within the subregions. It could also be part of the HIP program, where we have agencies and organizations with available land that they're looking to develop. They participate in that pilot program and develop good policy and permit streamlining around developing within those areas, or within corridor-wide or area-wide infill areas within their cities, so, or within their jurisdictions. So thank you for that comment. Jessica, do you see others, any other questions in here that we should answer?
I think we covered most of them.
I think there's one a comment here on maybe something that's missing, and I'm thinking that it might be within, and maybe we can just lift it up a little bit better. But also, would be very interested in hearing your thoughts once we have the program out and available for public comment. And this comment is, it would be great to have funding for two things. One, to help kickstart new purchases with the intent of delivering deed restricted housing to the missing middle. Recognizing that this is a segment of residents that's most underserved in the percent of housing built. And so we've recognized that. And so we are looking at ways of perhaps including some form of missing middle housing, or let's say housing that would be targeted for households earning above what we would typically consider affordable housing, yet it still would be less than what is typically the reality of the market. So that's something there for us to capture and perhaps see how we can lift up. And then two, to help fund collaborative digital infrastructure between and within cities. I think so that each department, building and safety and planning at each city, is building their own. Or let's see, maybe it's the comments that each is building its own software and processes, and they don't connect with other city departments. So on our page, on the REAP 2.0 page, we cover, and we didn't honestly cover it all that much in this presentation because we're focused on our PATH program, but we are embarking on a number of regional initiatives around providing support to cities and counties to share and collaborate on data and information. And so that work that we're looking to do under our early action initiatives may in fact dovetail into this comment around, just finding ways to create sharing within digital infrastructure of cities and counties. Yeah. And I should say, of course, this would also be part of that vision for our housing info on public and private lands, that we would have this collaborative, perhaps collaborative database of available lands that would be, it would be a cohort that could be managed in this, a singular fashion, perhaps.
We have 1 minute left in our time here.
Well, maybe the last one then, and this one it's around the connection between county transit agency funding and infill housing funding. And through the HIP pilot program and the CTC partnership program, we're thinking that this could be some good synergy. Once we know and have an understanding of where lands are available, that we could then connect that into the CTC investments so that we are doing exactly that, tying in housing with future investments. With that said, I really do appreciate everyone who has attended today. And again, this will be available after the webinar, and be on the lookout for an email from us sharing that our program is available. Thank you so much.